Welcome back to the deep dive. Today we are starting with the fact that it sounds like it was invented by a novelist, but it's actually just a bizarre geographic reality.
It really does. It's one of those things you couldn't make up.
Exactly. Picture the year 1867. We are in Sicily, just outside the ancient city of Agrigento. There is a specific suburb, a rough, craggy area, and the locals have a name for it. They call it chaos.
Which, of course, translates directly to chaos.
Right. And I don't mean chaos in the metaphorical sense of, a messy bedroom. I mean the primordial void. And it was right there, in a place explicitly named Chaos, that Luigi Pirandello was born.
It feels like the universe was engaging in a bit of heavy-handed literary foreshadowing, doesn't it?
It really does. And
Right.
Pirandello himself was completely obsessed with this. He saw it as his destiny.
Oh, absolutely. He spent his entire life obsessing over that coincidence. He famously wrote, "I am a child of chaos," and not metaphorically, but in reality. For him, it wasn't just a funny anecdote about his birth certificate.
Right.
It was the fundamental truth of his existence. He believed he was born into a formless, confused reality, and that everything human beings do, building societies, taking names, wearing clothes, adopting roles, is just a desperate attempt to impose order on that original chaos.
And that struggle between the raw, chaotic flux of life and the rigid forms we try to trap it in, that's the engine of everything we're discussing today, isn't it?
It is. It's the core tension in all of his work.
We are looking at a man who is, well, arguably the most important Italian playwright of the 20th century, a Nobel Prize winner, and the guy who essentially invented the tragic farce.
He's the bridge. He is the bridge between the 19th and 20th centuries. He took the solid, reliable storytelling of the Victorian era and just smashed it into pieces to show us the anxiety and fragmentation of the modern world.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. I mean, if you've ever felt like you're playing a role at work that is totally different from who you are at home, or if you've ever questioned whether you really know the people around you, you are living in a Pirandellian world.
You really are. His ideas have seeped into the very fabric of how we think about ourselves.
We have a massive stack of sources to get through today. We've got his biographies, his letters, the critical analysis of his plays, like 6 Characters in Search of an Author, and extensive historical context on the unification of Italy and the rise of fascism.
A lot to unpack.
A lot. And our mission is pretty clear. We want to understand how a wealthy, comfortable Sicilian son transformed into the master of disillusionment. We need to unpack his philosophy on identity, this terrifying idea that we don't actually exist as solid individuals. And we need to navigate the very real, very messy political life he led.
Including the topic that often gets, glossed over in high school literature classes. His membership in the Fascist Party and his complicated relationship with Mussolini.
Which is a paradox wrapped in a riddle.
Yeah.
But before we get to the politics and the riots in the theaters, let's go back to the map. You mentioned the name Cass. I was digging into the etymology in the notes, and it's actually quite grounded, which I've found funny. It comes from the Sicilian dialect word causi.
Right, which means trousers or pants.
Trousers. It seems less philosophical when you put it that way.
It does. It referred to the shape of a ravine nearby that split in two, looking like a pair of legs or trousers. But language is fluid,
Yeah.
Causi sounded enough like the Greek chaos.
And given the history of the area.
Exactly. Given the intense Greek history of Sicily, remember, Agrigento was Akragas, a massive Greek colony. The association just stuck. It became chaos.
It's a much better story.
It's a much better story.
And speaking of Greek roots, Pirandello's own name has a history there. His surname wasn't originally Pirandello.
No. The family traced its lineage back to the name Pirangelos. He was of Greek descent, and this wasn't just trivia to him. In a 1934 interview, specifically regarding his Nobel Prize, he highlighted this. He felt a deep connection to classical tragedy, to the ancient world that was literally buried in the soil under his feet. He saw himself as a Sicilian, yes, but specifically a Sicilian with that tragic, ancient Greek DNA.
So we have this boy, born in chaos, with the weight of Greek tragedy in his name. But his immediate reality was very 19th century industrial. His father, Stefano, wasn't a philosopher.
Not at all.
He was a businessman in the sulfur trade. And from what I've read about the Sicilian sulfur industry in the 1800s, this was not a gentle line of work.
It was brutal. Sulfur was known as the gold of Sicily, but extracting it was hellish. We're talking about deep, hot, dangerous mines, often worked by children, the Carusi, who were essentially enslaved.
Wow.
And Stefano Pirandello was a leaseholder of these mines. He was a big, robust, physically imposing man who made a fortune in this rough industry.
And his mother, Caterina Ricci Gramito, came from a very different background.
Very different. She was from the bourgeois professional class, but there's a political thread that ties both families together, and I think this is absolutely crucial for the listener to understand.
Okay.
Both the Pirandellos and the Ricci Gramitos were fierce patriots. They were anti-Bourbon. They were pro-unification.
So to understand Pirandello's cynicism later in life, you have to understand the idealism of his parents. This was the era of the Risorgimento, the resurgence.
Exactly. For decades, Italy had been a collection of fragmented states and foreign-controlled territories. The Bourbons controlled the south. The dream was a unified, democratic Italy.
A noble dream.
A very noble dream. Stefano Pirandello fought with Garibaldi. Caterina's family suffered for the cause. Her father was a target of the monarchy, and she was forced into exile in Malta when she was just 13.
13. So they were true believers. They thought that once the red shirts won and Italy was one nation, it would be a utopia of justice and liberty.
Precisely. And then 1861 happened. Unification was achieved. And almost immediately, the Great Disappointment set in.
Let's drill down into that great disappointment, because it feels like this is the moment the seed of Pirandello's worldview was planted. What exactly went wrong?
Well, the reality of the new Italy was starkly different from the Romantic dream. Instead of a brotherhood of free Italians, the South felt like it had simply been conquered by the North, by Piedmont.
Right, it wasn't a union, it was an acquisition.
That's how it felt. The new government was viewed as incredibly bureaucratic, corrupt, and distant. Taxes went up. Conscription was enforced. The poverty in Sicily didn't go away. In some ways, it got worse.
So Pirandello grows up in a house full of people who sacrificed everything for a great ideal, only to watch that ideal turn into a corrupt, paper-pushing nightmare.
That is the generational trauma. He watched his parents, particularly his mother, become bitter. The lesson he learned at the dinner table was that big ideals are often illusions. He calls this the sense of disproportion between ideals and reality.
And that's a phrase that comes up again and again.
It's key. If the greatest, most noble cause of your parents' generation turned out to be a lie, or at least a hollow disappointment, how can you trust any truth with a capital T?
It creates a fundamental skepticism.
Mm.
And it wasn't just the politics that were failing to live up to the hype. The domestic situation in the Pirandello household was also, let's call it, complicated. An understatement.
The relationship between his mother and father was a major source of tension.
It was incredibly fraught. Stefano, the father, was a man of the mines, rough, authoritative, and prone to what we might call extracurricular activity.
Right. Luigi discovered early on that his father was having affairs.
He did, and that has to be devastating for a sensitive child. You have this mother who is already politically disillusioned, and now she's being betrayed in her own home.
It created a deep, permanent rift between Luigi and his father, didn't it?
It did. He viewed his father as a source of brute force and hypocrisy. But inevitably, this pushed him closer to his mother. He developed a veneration for her that bordered on the obsessive. She became his saint.
The long-suffering saint. Yes. And I read about the novella he wrote after she died, Colloqui con I personaggi, Conversations with Characters. It sounds almost ghost-like.
It is. He writes about trying to keep her spirit alive, conversing with her. This dynamic, the suffering saintly woman and the domineering, unfaithful, or simply incomprehensible husband, became a blueprint for his fiction. You see it over and over again.
So the family unit in Pirandello's work is rarely a place of comfort.
Never. It's a trap. It's a place where people are forced to wear masks to survive each other.
Okay, so we have the chaos of his birth, the great disappointment of politics, and the betrayal of the father. Young Luigi is a smart kid, obviously. He starts writing early.
He writes his first tragedy at age 12. But his dad, being the practical sulfur businessman, wants him to go to technical school.
Right. Stefano wanted a successor for the mines. He don't want a poet. But Luigi managed to maneuver his way into a classical education, finishing high school in Palermo. And it's there that he fell in love with his cousin, Lina.
And this wasn't just a puppy love situation, right? This was serious.
Oh, very serious. It was intense enough that Lina's family demanded he stop his studies and go work in the sulfur mines so he could afford to marry her immediately.
Wow, and he did it.
He did. And surprisingly, given his hatred for his father's business, he actually did it. In 1886, he spent time working in the mines of Porto Empedocle.
I think that period in the mines is crucial context.
Yeah.
We think of Pirandello as this high-minded philosopher, but he saw the sweaty, dangerous reality of labor.
He did. He saw the Carusi, the child laborers. He saw the brutality. This experience informed works like Ciala scopre la luna, Ciala discovers the moon. It grounded his existentialism in dirt and rock.
Yeah.
He knew that for many people, life wasn't an abstract concept. It was a struggle to breathe. But eventually, the marriage plans with Lena were postponed, and he would turn to academia. He went to the University of Rome in 1887.
And here we go with the great disappointment, part 2. He arrives in Rome, the eternal city. He's probably expecting marble statues, heroes, the glory of the Caesars, and the Risorgimento.
And he finds rain, mud, gray buildings, and a city populated not by heroes, but by tired civil servants.
A total letdown. There's a specific quote about his arrival in Rome that I think perfectly encapsulates his developing personality.
The desperate laugh.
That's the one. He said, "When I arrived in Rome, it was raining hard, it was nighttime, and I felt like my heart was being crushed, but then I laughed like a man in the throes of desperation."
That is the desperate laugh. Bookmark that, because it is the key to his entire artistic philosophy. He realized in that moment that when reality is overwhelmingly disappointing, when the tragedy is so absurd that tears aren't enough, the only authentic reaction is to laugh.
But it's not a funny laugh. It's not ha-ha.
I know, it's a defensive reflex, it's a spasm, it's the laugh of someone seeing the cosmic joke. Rome wasn't grand, it was petty. He stayed with an uncle who was a graying and exhausted functionary.
And this uncle had been a patriot, a fighter.
Exactly, and now he was just pushing paper in a dim office. Rome was a monument to decadence and mediocrity for him.
His time at the University of Rome didn't end well either. He got into a fight with a Latin professor.
A very serious dispute. It was significant enough that he was effectively expelled or forced to leave. But this turned out to be a blessing in disguise. He transferred to the University of Bonn in Germany to finish his doctorate.
And this German period seems like the missing link in understanding his brain. He wasn't just soaking up Italian culture. He was getting a heavy dose of German philosophy.
Absolutely. In Bonn, he was reading the German romantics, Goethe, Heine, Tieck. He was absorbing a different kind of thinking, one that was deeply concerned with the nature of the self, irony, and the grotesque.
So it was in Germany that he began to formulate his theories on humorism.
That's right. He was translating Goethe. He was stepping outside the Sicilian mental box and looking at his own culture from a distance.
So he gets his doctorate on the dialect of Agrigento, ironically returning to his roots, and comes back to Rome in the 1890s. He's in his 20s, he's writing, he's mingling with the literary crowd like Luigi Capuana, and the topic of marriage comes up again.
Yes. The affair with his cousin Lena had fizzled out. In 1894, his father, Stefano, stepped in to arrange a marriage. The bride was Maria Antonietta Portolano.
An arranged marriage. This was essentially a business merger, wasn't it?
In many ways, yes. Antonietta was the daughter of a business associate. She was a shy, withdrawn girl raised in a very sheltered environment by nuns.
And she had a substantial dowry.
A very substantial dowry, which Stefano Pirandello invested into his business.
So Luigi marries her, they settle in Rome. And for a while, on the surface, it looks like the standard bourgeois life. They have 3 kids, Stefano, Rosalia, and Fausto. Luigi is teaching, writing essays, getting published.
It was a deceptive stability. There were cracks. Antonietta didn't really understand his heart. She wasn't an intellectual partner. But they were comfortable, and then came 1903.
The year the floor fell out.
A catastrophe.
It sounds like a plot twist that a writer would reject for being too dramatic. A literal flood.
A flood in the sulfur mines of Aragona. And we have to understand the financial mechanics here to see why this was total ruin. Stefano Pirandello hadn't just invested his own money.
Right.
He had invested Antonietta's entire dowry, her financial security, her identity as a woman of status into those mines.
So the water rushes in, destroys the mines, and the money vanishes.
Instantly. The Pirandello family went from wealthy to effectively bankrupt overnight. But the loss of money was just the trigger. The real explosion was psychological.
This is where we need to talk about Antonietta. How did she take the news?
She was the one who opened the letter announcing the disaster. The shock was so profound that it induced a physical collapse. She was paralyzed for a time. And when she emerged from that paralysis, her mental landscape had completely shattered.
And it wasn't just depression or sadness. It manifested as a very specific, aggressive paranoia.
It was a monomania, pathological jealousy. She became convinced, with absolutely no evidence, that Luigi was cheating on her. She believed he was hiding wealth from her, that he was conspiring against her. She would scream. She would become physically violent.
Think about the irony here.
Yeah.
Luigi grew up hating his father for being a cheater. He prided himself on being a dedicated family man.
Mm-hmm.
And now he is trapped in a house where he's being accused day and night of the very sin he despises most.
It was a pressure cooker. A complete nightmare. He was teaching extra classes to make ends meet, writing furiously to sell stories, and then coming home to a wife who might attack him or scream at him for hours.
He later admitted he contemplated suicide during this period.
He did. He looked out the window and thought about ending it.
But he didn't. And this is the pivot point of his life. Instead of killing himself, he wrote The Late Mattia Pascal,
which is famously a book about a man who fakes his death.
You can see the wish fulfillment dripping off the page.
It is raw autobiography in the form of fantasy. He sat by his wife's bedside, writing while she slept or raved, and he imagined a character, Mattia Pascal, who is trapped in a miserable marriage and a dead-end job.
Right.
Mattia wins some money at a casino, and on his way home, he finds out that the authorities have found a body in a mill race and identified it as him.
Mattia is officially dead.
And his reaction is joy. Pure joy. He thinks, I'm free, I can go anywhere, I can be anyone. He changes his name to Adriano Mice, he travels, he tries to start over.
But this is where Pirandello pulls the rug out.
Yeah.
Because Mattia, or Adriano, realizes that being free is actually a nightmare.
Exactly. He tries to fall in love, but he can't marry because he has no papers. He is robbed, but he can't go to the police because Adriano Mice doesn't exist.
Yeah.
He realizes that outside of the mask of society, the name, the tax ID, the marital status, a human being is a non-entity.
A ghost.
He is a ghost floating through the world. The freedom was an illusion.
So what happens?
The freedom was a form of death. Mattia eventually has to fake his own suicide as Adriano Mice, and then he goes back to his old village. But his wife has remarried, so he ends up living in a library, visiting his own grave. He is the late Mattia Pascal. He is neither alive nor dead.
This book, published in 1904, changed everything for Pirandello. It was a massive hit.
It was an international success. It was translated into German. It was acclaimed. It gave him the financial footing to keep going. But philosophically, it established his core theme, the mask. We complain about the masks we wear, father, employee, citizen, but without them, we dissolve.
This brings us to his theoretical masterpiece. In 1908, he publishes the essay L'umorismo humorism. And we need to be really careful with this word because in English, humor means jokes.
Right. It means stand-up comedy. That is not what Pirandello means.
Not at all. He makes a crucial distinction between the comical and the humorous.
Right. And it's a brilliant distinction.
Walk us through that.
Okay. The comical is the warning of the contrary. The example he gives is an elderly lady who has dyed her hair neon blonde, is wearing heavy makeup, and is dressed in clothes meant for a teenager.
Okay.
When you see her, you laugh. Why? Because she is the opposite of what an old lady should be. That immediate perception of the opposite is the comic.
It's the surface level reaction. She looks ridiculous.
All right. But now, Pirandello says apply reflection. Think about why she is doing that. Maybe she has a younger husband who is losing interest in her. Maybe she spends her nights weeping, terrified of being abandoned, and she wears those clothes as a desperate, pathetic attempt to hold on to love.
And suddenly you can't laugh anymore. Or if you do, the laugh is bitter.
That shift from the warning of the contrary to the feeling of the contrary is humorism. It's when you see the tragedy inside the comedy. It's a mix of pity and amusement. It destroys the ability to judge the character as a villain or a hero.
You just see a suffering human being dealing with the absurdity of life.
Exactly. And this wasn't just an academic theory for him. This was his daily life with Antonietta.
Of course.
A neighbor hearing Antonietta scream might think she was a monster. That's the comic or superficial view. But Pirandello, living with her, saw the humorous truth. She was a terrified woman whose mind had broken under the weight of trauma. He couldn't just hate her. He had to understand the tragedy within her madness.
This ability to hold two opposing truths in his head at the same time, she is my tormentor and she is a victim, leads us to the concept that I think is most relevant to us today. The concept of one, no one, and 100,000.
Uno, nessuno e centomila. It is the title of his last novel, and it's the summary of his entire existence.
The premise of this book is so simple, it's maddening. The protagonist, the Tangelo Moscarda, is standing in front of a mirror, and his wife casually says, "You know, your nose tilts a little to the right."
And Moscarda is stunned. He has looked at his face every day for his entire life, and he never noticed his nose tilted. He realizes in that split second that the Moscarda he knows, the one in his head, is completely different from the Mascarda his wife sees.
And if his wife sees a different version, then his friends see another version, and the bank teller sees another, the list goes on.
We are one to ourselves, but we are 100,000 to the people around us. Every person you meet constructs a version of you in their mind. You are the nice guy to one, the jerk to another, the competent employee to a third.
And because there are 100,000 versions of you floating around,
You are ultimately no one. There is no solid, immutable core. If you stripped away all the reflections, all the relationships, all the perceptions, there is nothing left but flux.
let's apply this to the modern listener. I mean, think about social media. You have your LinkedIn profile, that's a mask. You have your Instagram, another mask. You have the way you talk in a group chat with your college friends versus the family WhatsApp group. Pirandello is asking, if you deleted all those accounts and you sat alone in a dark room, who is there?
And his answer is terrifying. Nobody is there. Or rather, a constantly changing stream of consciousness is there, but not a fixed self. We are built by the gaze of others.
This philosophy was forged in the fire of his home life. We have to talk about the progression of Antonietta's illness. He kept her at home for a long time.
He did, for over 15 years. He refused to institutionalize her. He believed it was his duty. But the violence escalated. The paranoia became dangerous for the children, especially their daughter Lieta, who Antonietta targeted aggressively.
That's just awful.
It was untenable. Finally, in 1919, he makes the call.
He places her in a private clinic.
Yes, it was supposed to be temporary. He wrote letters saying he hoped to bring her back, but she never left. She remained there until her death in 1959, long after Pirandello himself had died.
But this proximity to madness, living with it for decades, gave him a unique perspective for the stage. In most plays before this, a mad character was a plot device. They were just crazy.
Right, a caricature. But Pirandello treats madness differently.
How so?
He treats madness as a valid epistemological stance. Look at his play, Henry IV. A man falls off a horse during a costume party and hits his head. He wakes up believing he is the Holy Roman Emperor Henry IV. He lives in a castle. He makes his servants dress up in period clothing.
20 years.
Right. But the twist is that at a certain point, he regains his sanity. He realizes he isn't the emperor. But he looks at the sane world, a world of treachery, aging, and pain, and he decides, no thanks.
He chooses to pretend to stay mad.
Yes. He chooses the mask of the emperor because it is stable, it is safe. In that role, time is stopped. Nothing can hurt him.
So the madman is actually the only one making a rational choice to control his reality.
Precisely. Pirandello is asking, who is really crazy?
Yeah.
The man who plays one role perfectly forever, or the sane people who lie, cheat, wear makeup to hide their age, and change their opinions every 5 minutes?
It's a profound question, and it brings us to 1921, the year Pirandello decided to break the theater. 6 characters in search of an author.
This is the big one. If Mattia Pascal was his novelistic breakthrough, 6 characters was the earthquake that shook Western drama.
Let's set the scene. It's the premiere at the Val Theater in Rome. The audience is seated. They're expecting a play. And what do they see?
Nothing. The curtain is up. The stage is bare. There is no set. A group of actors walks out in their street rehearsal clothes, and they start chatting, warming up. They're acting like they're about to rehearse a Pirandello play.
So the audience is already confused. Did the show start? Is this a mistake?
Utter confusion.
Right.
And then from the back of the theater or a side entrance, 6 figures appear. They are dressed in black, looking pale and intense. These are the characters: a father, a mother, a stepdaughter, a son, and 2 younger children.
And their claim is mind-bending.
It really is. They say, we are characters created by an author who imagined us, but then decided not to write our story. We are unfinished. We need you to act out our drama so we can exist.
The manager of the theater thinks they're lunatics.
Of course. But the father argues brilliantly that characters are more real than living people. He says, a character has truly a life of his own. He is always somebody, but a man. A man may be nobody.
Because Hamlet is always Hamlet. He never changes. He never disappoints you. A human being changes every second.
Exactly. So the play becomes a battle between the characters who want their tragic story told with absolute truth and the actors who try to perform it but inevitably fake it. The stepdaughter screams at the leading lady, "That's not how I left. You're doing it wrong."
It's meta-theater. It's a play about the failure of plays to capture reality. But the audience at the premiere, They didn't appreciate the philosophy.
It was pandemonium. It wasn't just booze, it was a riot. People were shouting, "Manicomio! Manicomio! Madhouse! Asylum!" They felt insulted. They thought Pirandello was mocking them.
There were fistfights in the stalls.
Actual fistfights. And I read that Pirandello and his daughter Lieta had to escape through a side door to avoid being physically attacked. People were throwing coins at them.
Wow, what a disaster.
It was a disaster. He went home devastated. But here's the vindication. Mere months later, the play opened in Milan. And it was a triumph.
A total reversal.
Then London. Then New York. Then Paris. It swept the world.
Why the turnaround? Why did the rest of the world get it when Rome didn't?
I think the timing was perfect. This is the 1920s, post-World War I. The old world had collapsed. The old certainties of religion, empire, and logic had been blown apart by trench warfare.
People were ready for it.
They were ready for a type of art that said, reality is broken, truth is subjective. Pirandello gave form to the anxiety of the modern age.
Okay, so by the mid-1920s, Pirandello is a global superstar. He is touring the world. But now we have to navigate the minefield, the fascist paradox.
This is the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
And we have to be precise here.
In 1924, shortly after the Matteotti crisis, which was a political murder that nearly brought down Mussolini's government.
A huge scandal.
A huge scandal.
Yeah.
Pirandello sends a public telegram to Mussolini asking to join the National Fascist Party.
The timing is baffling. Most intellectuals were fleeing the party or keeping their heads down. Pirandello, the man who questions everything, signs up right when the regime is showing its most brutal face.
Why? I mean, what's the thinking? Was it just opportunism?
Yeah.
He needed money for his theater company, the Teatro d'Arte, right?
That is the cynical interpretation. And it's partially true. He needed state funding to realize his dream of a national theater. Mussolini gave him that funding. But I don't think we can write it off purely as greed. There is a philosophical angle.
Go on.
Remember the chaos and the great disappointment? Pirandello despised the weak, corrupt democracy of liberal Italy, the system that had failed his parents. He might have seen fascism as a force of will, a way to impose form on the chaos.
A strong hand to create order.
Perhaps. He once said, "I am a fascist because I am Italian," as if it were the only authentic choice. But at the same time, he described himself as apolitical and only a man in the world.
That's the contradiction. He joined the party, but he refused to behave like a good party member.
Not at all. The fascists didn't trust him. The secret police, the OVRA, kept a file on him. They spied on his mail. They tracked his movements.
There's the story about the party card.
Yes, in 1927, he apparently got into an argument with a fascist official about the censorship of art or theater management. In a rage, he tore his party membership card to pieces in front of the official.
In 1927 Italy, that could get you sent to internal exile, or worse.
He was protected by his international fame. Mussolini couldn't just disappear a Nobel-caliber author, but the relationship was cold. Pirandello realized that the fascist order he might have hoped for was just another mask, a particularly ugly, hollow mask.
And then we have the incident with the Nobel Prize medal. This one really confuses people. In 1935, Italy invades Ethiopia. The League of Nations imposes sanctions. Mussolini asks Italians to donate their gold to the state, the Gold to the Fatherland campaign.
And Pirandello donates his Nobel medal to be melted down.
That feels like a full endorsement of the war. How do you square that circle?
You almost can't. It looks like a full endorsement. But look at what he was writing at the same time. He was working on The Giants of the Mountain. In that play, a group of poetic actors is destroyed by the servants of the giants. Industrial, powerful brutes who care nothing for art.
The giants are the fascists.
That is the standard reading. So, physically, he hands his gold to the regime. Artistically, he writes a play about how the regime murders art. It is the ultimate dissociation.
He was living one, no one, and 100,000 in his own political life.
Completely. He was wearing the fascist badge, but the man underneath was screaming in the opposite direction.
It's a tragedy in itself. He died before he could resolve it.
He did. He won the Nobel Prize in 1934. Guglielmo Marconi nominated him. The committee cited his bold and ingenious revival of dramatic and scenic art.
But by 1936, he is dying, and his death. Even his funeral arrangements were a final act of rebellion against the fascists.
This is my favorite part of his story. It's so perfectly him. Mussolini wanted a state funeral. He wanted the pomp, the black shirts, the speeches, the glory of a fascist hero passing away.
And Pirandello left a will that said, essentially, over my dead body.
He wrote, and I quote, "Dead, let me not be clothed, let me be naked. As soon as possible, let a hearse of the lowest class, that of the poor, transport me, and let no one accompany me, neither relatives nor friends, the hearse, the horse, the driver, and nothing more.
Let me be naked. After a lifetime of analyzing masks, he wanted to leave the world without one.
Exactly. No uniform, no medal, no suit, just the man. And he requested cremation, which was shocking for Catholic Italy. He wanted his ashes taken back to Sicily, to Caus.
But the journey of the ashes is a story in itself. It didn't happen right away.
No, it was a whole saga. Because of the war, the ashes stayed in a vase in Rome for years. Finally, in 1947, after the war, they were transported to Sicily. But, and this is very Pirandellian, the vase was too big for the crate they had.
You're kidding.
I'm not. The American pilot refused to take it. They had to pour his ashes into a simple cardboard box to fly him home.
A cardboard box. After all that.
And then when they got to Sicily, they transferred them into a Greek vase. But the local bishop refused to bless a cremation urn. It was a whole bureaucratic farce. Finally, they buried the ashes under a pine tree near his childhood home.
Back to chaos.
Perfect circle.
When we look at his legacy today, it's everywhere. You mentioned the theater of the absurd earlier.
You literally cannot have Samuel Beckett without Pirandello. Waiting for Godot, two guys, waiting for something that never comes, debating their existence. That is Pirandello's DNA.
Harold Pinter, Edward Albee.
They all stand on his shoulders. The idea of language as a tool to hide, not to reveal. The uncertainty of identity. That's all him.
And Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialists.
Oh, absolutely. Sartre's entire concept of bad faith, the idea that we lie to ourselves to avoid the terrifying responsibility of freedom, is pure Pirandello. When Sartre says, hell is other people, he is echoing Pirandello's idea that other people are the ones who trap us in false identities with their perceptions of us.
He really was the turning point.
Mm-hmm.
He took the heavy, dusty furniture of 19th century realism and he blew it up. He showed us that the truth isn't an object you find, it's a story you tell.
And usually it's a story you tell to protect yourself.
So we've covered the chaos of his birth, the betrayal of his ideals, the madness of his wife, the invention of metatheater, and the paradox of his politics. It is a life defined by the refusal to accept easy answers.
It is the triumph of the desperate lav.
Hmm.
He looked into the void, saw nothing, and decided to build art out of it.
I want to leave the listener with a thought today. A little homework for the commute or the gym. Think about one, no one, and 100,000. Think about the you that exists in your boss's mind, the you in your partner's mind, the you in your parents' mind.
They are all different. They might even be contradictory.
And the you in your own mind changes every time you learn something new or forget something old.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, if you are a different person to everyone you meet and a different person to yourself every day, do you actually exist? Or are you just a collection of reflections in other people's eyes?
And if you were alone on a desert island with no mirrors, would you be anyone at all?
Deep stuff to chew on. Thanks for diving into the chaos with us.
A pleasure as always.
We'll catch you on the next deep dive.